All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. As we move through November, there's a lot of cool stuff going on, but I'm really excited because we have a lot of virtual field trips this month. So we're going out in the field in places like the UK and Africa, Costa Rica, here in Canada, even Australia. So we've got some really cool live in the field stuff. It's always great to mix it into the month. And the event that we're going to have this afternoon is one of our favorite spots to go and visit. It is spending a little time with Polar Bears International and their Director of Conservation Outreach and Staff Scientist, Alysa McCall. She's joined us a ton of times in the past, and we've learned so much about polar bears from her and other members of the PBI team. Today's pretty cool. We'll be in the field on one of the Tundra Buggies. So let's get right into it. Let's bring Alysa in here with us.
Hey,
Hey,
hi Joe.
Alysa.
Hi, everyone. Hey, nice to be here.
Yeah, great to have you with us. And a little cold. I'm in Canada, but we're still not quite as cold as you've got it up there. I see a little snow, a toque. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a little chilly. It's not quite as cold as you might think considering the time of year, but it's definitely a little below freezing. We've got snow on the ground and we've got polar bears all around.
That is a great thing to have. I'm a little bit jealous. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I'm going to let you take over for a little bit. We've got a ton of classrooms on YouTube. We've got classrooms hanging out backstage. We're going to play some Kahoot, Q&A time. But for now, why don't you take us into that polar bear world for a bit?
Great, thank you. And thanks everyone for joining today. I can't wait to get to your questions. Before I dive into a little presentation I wanted to show you where I am. So believe it or not, there is a polar bear. That is a polar bear right there. It's a little hard to see, but he's having a nap on the ice. And this morning we've been out here watching polar bears, and we've actually been out here for the last several weeks watching polar bears. And I am on a very cool vehicle called a Tundra Buggy. So it's kind of like a polar bear monster truck. And you can see this is the front of the vehicle here. There's the steering wheel. And I have my team all working in the back here doing different things. So we come out here, we're watching the polar bears every day at this time of the year. We are live streaming them to the world on the explore.org cameras, and we're celebrating how much we love polar bears and talking about them. So polar bears are here right now because winter's coming. So in this area of the world, I'll show you a map in a little bit, but we're pretty far south in the polar bear world. And so in this area, there's no sea ice for the bears during the summer. So all the polar bears come onto land. They really want to be out on that sea ice. We'll get to that. But for now, they're stuck here. And as soon as that ice comes and this bay freezes over, then those polar bears are going to be long gone. And then I go home because the bears are gone for the winter. So I'll show you a bit more about that here. I'm going to share my screen. We are going to get into it. Present. 1 second. And if that bear gets up and walks around, then I might just have to stop real quick and show everybody. Okay. Do this, and we will do this. Ready to go. All right, so my name is Alysa, as Joe mentioned, and right now I am in Churchill, which is on the traditional lands of the Cree, Dene, Inuit, and Métis people of Canada in Treaty 5 territory. And we are so grateful to work here and to have houses here and to be part of this amazing community that is so rich in cultures and rich in wildlife. At Polar Bears International, we are the only group in the world that is solely focused on protecting wild polar bears. And we want to keep polar bears in the Arctic for a very long time. And we do this through a variety of ways. So we do research, we do our own research, and we help fund or pay for other people's research so that they can ask and answer really great questions about polar bears. We do education. So talk to people like you all around the world about why polar bears matter, some cool facts about them, why we should keep them around. We also help media. So if you see TV shows or movies about polar bears, we want to make sure that those are accurate and that they have wonderful footage. And so sometimes we'll help with that sort of media. And then advocacy. And that means speaking up on behalf of something, and particularly polar bears. Polar bears don't have a voice of their own. So we're speaking on behalf of polar bears, trying to help get protections in place that the species needs. And we love polar bears. They are so special in so many ways. They are the biggest bear, first of all. So there are 8 species of bear around the world. Polar bears are the biggest. They are also the only marine bear. So this is a bear that's tied to the ocean, which is unusual. All the other bears we know of are bears that are on land, and polar bears need the ocean because They are the most carnivorous of all the bears, and that's because of their diet. So polar bears have adapted to live on this Arctic sea ice landscape. They've got their fur that looks white, but it's actually clear and it's hollow and it traps air against their body. And they've got two thick layers of fur. It's like wearing really thick, warm sweater and almost like a rain jacket over top. They've got sharp claws and sharp teeth, and that's all because they're looking to hunt seals, and specifically seal blubber. And blubber is like, well, it's fat. And blubber has so many calories or so much energy. And polar bears need all that fat and that energy to be the biggest bear that lives out on the ice. So they have lots of different adaptations that allow them to live in this habitat while they go hunt seals. And this polar bear in this picture, he's doing something that we call still hunting. So you can see that there's a hole in the ice there. Seals, of course, need to breathe air. They swim underwater, they're very good swimmers, but they have to come up for air. And so a polar bear will wait very patiently by a seal hole. And then when a seal comes up, it can pounce into the hole and grab that slippery seal and drag it out onto the ice. And on the right-hand side here, you see this seal is just resting. He's resting on the ice, and so a polar bear can sneak up on that seal from behind. Polar bears are very quiet, even though they're so big. They're very sneaky, and they're good at catching seals. So polar bears, even though they are wonderful swimmers, they can swim for hundreds of kilometers if they have to. They're very agile in the water, but they cannot outswim a seal. They really need that Arctic sea ice as a platform, and they use that ice to travel, to find mates, and to hunt their main prey seals and get their food. It's really like a giant dinner plate. We can think of it that way. And here's a great example of all these different adaptations. Look at those big sharp claws in the front there. One neat thing about the polar bears, I think, is look at the long neck there and the shape of its head. Very long, kind of elegant noses. If you compare this to a brown bear, which has kind of a short, stocky, blocky head, you can see that this polar bear is very well suited for swimming while keeping its head above water and for getting its head in and out of seal holes in the ice. So this truly is a blubber hunting ice bear. That's what they're all about. Moms and cubs are so important in the population because these moms are adding new polar bears to the population. It makes them quite vulnerable to change, and also it means that they're so important. So at Polar Bears International, we do different research to look at moms and cubs. We know that moms have about 1 to 2 cubs every 3 years. They can have 3 cubs sometimes. But they're going to raise those cubs for about 2.5 years, and then the cub will be weaned. And between the time when cubs are about 2.5 years old to 5 years old, they are called subadults. And those are kind of like the teenagers of the bear world. So they're not fully grown yet, but they're on their own and they have to figure things out. So they're vulnerable too. And once a polar bear reaches 5 years old, it's considered an adult. Now, there's many neat things about moms and cubs, but a couple of my favorite things is that where I am in Churchill here, when these moms, when they get pregnant out on the sea ice and they come back on land, they're going to be entering dens right now. So any pregnant females in this area should be in a den right now, in the national park, probably that's nearby here. They're going to rest all winter. They're going to give birth in the next month or so. They are going to nurse their cubs for several months, and then they're going to get back out on that sea ice in about March. So many months from now. And if you add that all up, that's about 8 months without eating. So these moms can go 8 months without eating, which is one of the longest fasting periods, or the longest in the animal kingdom. We don't know any other mammal like this that goes that long without eating. So that's pretty incredible that they can do that. Many of us don't like to skip lunch out here. So these bears are going a long time. And another wonderful thing about these bears is that their milk is the fattiest milk we find on land. So that means it has so many calories, and it's just over 30% milk fat. So it's like these cubs are drinking whipping cream when they're born. And that's helping them grow so incredibly fast. When a polar bear cub is born, it's only about the size of a block of butter or so you could hold it in your hands quite easily. But these cubs are getting so many calories from their mom's milk that they're growing so fast. And by the time they're just several months old, they can be, over 20 pounds. And so if you imagine a human baby that's born on average about 7 pounds, if you can imagine in just a couple months, if you had a 3-month-old human baby that was now like 140 pounds, that would be really scary. That would be too much, too fast for humans. But for polar bears, they need to grow really quickly because they need to get out on that sea ice and learn how to be polar bears with their mom. And the sea ice can be a tough place to live. It's cold, it's icy, it's dark, the ice is moving beneath their feet as they walk. It's really quite a wild, wild environment. But we find them all over the environment in the north on that sea ice. All these different shapes here, they are all different polar bear populations. And actually, this year we added one more. Well, we divided one of these into two. So there's now 20 polar bear populations around the world. Believe it or not, we actually don't really have polar bears right at the North Pole. So polar bears don't really see Santa Claus. There's not a lot of food at the North Pole. It's too dark and too cold, and the water's too deep that seals don't live there. And really, where we find polar bears is where we have seals, where there's food for them. So Canada has 2/3 of the world's polar bears, which is pretty special. And polar bears also live in Alaska in the United States, Norway, Russia, and Greenland. And all of these countries work together to research and understand and conserve polar bears. Now, we talk about Arctic sea ice, and polar bears need Arctic sea ice, but it's not only polar bears that need the sea ice, it's the entire Arctic food chain, and polar bears are at the top of that food chain. We like to say that sea ice is to the ocean what soil is to a forest. And someone even said recently, which I really loved, it's like the soil in a farm or the soil in a garden. That sea ice is really growing life out of it. So algae, the plants of the water, they grow in the sea ice. And those plants, that algae feeds the diatoms and copepods, the little microorganisms floating around. Those feed the fish, which feed the seals, which feed the polar bear. And of course, we know there's also whales in this environment, and there's people that live all across the north and also depend on a stable Arctic food chain, and that also use the sea ice to find food and to travel. So the Arctic sea ice is so important in the north for the polar bear, but for everything else that lives there. And no matter where you are watching from today, sea ice matters to you too. Sea ice is so large and white that it reflects a lot of sunlight away from Earth, and that means it helps cool our planet. So we also like to call sea ice Earth's air conditioner. So you can imagine an air conditioner cooling you down on a really hot day. That's what Arctic sea ice is doing for our whole planet. It's helping regulate all our climate systems around the world. So we as humans really love and need Arctic sea ice as well. It's important that we keep it in the north. So this is what's happening. So we are concerned about Arctic sea ice because we are losing it in certain parts of the world, and that's impacting polar bears. So when we burn fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gas, we are releasing emissions into our atmosphere. So if you think about pollution in the atmosphere, those emissions trap heat. They're like a heat trapping blanket. And if we have regular amounts of these carbon emissions, that's okay. We have a stable temperature on Earth. We need to trap some heat around Earth for our own selves and our own comfort. But as humans started burning more and more fossil fuels and releasing more and more gases into the atmosphere, we have thickened this heat trapping blanket. So we've got too many layers on our Earth, and the heat cannot escape like it used to. And so that means that temperatures are rising, and we all know that ice doesn't like the warmth. You go outside on a sunny day and you've got a lemonade with ice cubes in it, those ice cubes are going to melt if it's hot outside. Same thing's happening in the Arctic. We're seeing Arctic sea ice not form quite as long or in certain areas, so it doesn't like that heat. Now, if we did absolutely nothing to change the current path we're on, we know we could lose most of the world's polar bears by the end of the century. But the good news is that we have the solutions, and polar bears are not yet endangered. So we still have 25 to 26,000 polar bears across the Arctic. They are considered vulnerable because they are threatened by climate change. Their habitat is threatened by climate change, but we still do have time, and that's the good news. And we have the solutions. We know what we need to do. And here's what we all can do. So we can shift our energies, we can burn less fossil fuels. When we do burn fossil fuels, we can burn it more efficiently, and we can use more efficient energies. We can use solar power and wind power and energy from nature. And one of the best things you can do, no matter what age you are, is to talk about it. So adults can vote, but even if you're not an adult, you still have so much influence in your home and in your school and in your community. You can talk to your friends and your parents and your teachers. You can ask them, where does your energy come from? We've had some schools that have started shifting to getting electric school buses. And we had one school, I believe it was in California, and they redesigned their school bus routes and they were able to take a whole bus off the road. They got a lot more efficient with their bus routes. You can, just ask questions and spread what you love. So whether it's polar bears or your, fishing hole that you go to or a nature hike that you do, if you love the outdoors and you love anything around you, spread that love around. And the more we talk about the things we love, the more likely we are to be able to protect them. Now, while we're working to protect polar bears from climate change and we're working to change our energies, there's a lot of things we can do in the meantime. And that includes learning a lot more about polar bears and what they need and what people know about them. And so at Polar Bears International, we're doing a lot of different work. We're working with Indigenous knowledge. So there's communities around the north, especially across Canada, that know a lot about polar bears. And we want to listen to what they know and see what they need. We're looking at denning. So again, those moms and cubs, how can we help protect them when they're so vulnerable and so important? Human polar bear interactions are on the rise. I'll talk a little bit more about that. We also are looking more at genetics about polar bears. So are polar bears different genetically in different parts of the Arctic? What are these genes looking like? A lot of that sort of information can help us better protect polar bears in the long term if we know what genes they have. And we're also doing some tracking. So where are polar bears moving and why and when and all those good things. And you can also take a look at some tracking. So this is an older screenshot of our polar bear tracker, but you can go online, polarbearsinternational.org, and you can check out our polar bear tracker and you can see where the polar bears are right now in this area. So right now the polar bears are on land, but in the coming weeks, the ice is forming and those polar bears will head out onto Hudson Bay, this area here. And you can see that they all kind of do different things. And when you click on the polar bears, it'll tell you about all the different bears. They have different names and numbers and cubs, and you can learn all about them. It's a very fun tool. You can be like a scientist checking out all these polar bears. And this is a human bear interactions thing I mentioned. So that's a big thing, a big topic in Churchill, where I am right now. Churchill, Manitoba, Canada is sometimes called the polar bear capital of the world because polar bears are always been here and they gather here at this time of year, which I mentioned earlier, which is why I'm here watching them right now. And Churchill is very well suited to live with polar bears. They have a lot of experience. They have a lot of tools to live with polar bears. They have a polar bear alert hotline. So if you see a polar bear in town, you can call a number and tell the officers where the bear is and they will come move the bear away. They have a holding facility to move problem bears to, or just bears that have, come into town or won't get out of town, the bears that need a bit of extra help. Churchill has a lot of different ways to handle polar bears, but not many communities do. It's rare, but more and more communities are seeing more polar bears. And so we feel at Polar Bears International, if our goal is to keep polar bears in the Arctic, then we have an obligation to support the people that need to live more and more with polar bears. And so we're doing this through a few different ways. We're testing a radar project. We're using artificial intelligence. I'm trying to train this radar to understand what a polar bear looks like. And then it could, if it saw a polar bear, it could send a text message or sound a siren or turn a light on. It could give people warning, basically, is the point. It could give people lots of warning to get inside and get safe. And then there's a better chance that people are safe and that polar bear is safe as well. We're also doing very simple things like providing safer bear equipment like bear spray, flares, cracker shells, things that will scare a bear away. And again, protect the person, but also the polar bear. And then on the right here, that's just a bear-proof garbage bin. Managing garbage and waste is hugely important with any bear species. If a bear gets some garbage or gets rewarded by that sort of behavior, it's going to do it again and again. They are very, very smart. But if there's no reward when they're looking for garbage, then they're much more likely to just walk through town and not want to come back. We also work with kids across the north. So I know we have viewers from all over the place. Some kids, especially living in the north, in the summer, they could be on the playground. And I bet maybe none of you have to worry about polar bears on your playground, but there are many children that should be aware that it's a possibility. And so we also have a bunch of different coloring books for different countries and different languages about how to stay safe when you play in areas that might have polar bears. So it's a kind of a nice way to talk to people about different ways to protect yourself and the bears. And I just wanted to give a quick shout out for any teachers watching that at polarbearsinternational.org, we do have all sorts of different materials and lessons and videos and all sorts of fun stuff if you want to learn more about polar bears in your classroom. And with that, I'm so excited to take any questions you might have. We're keeping an eye out for polar bears here. We're having a lovely day on the Arctic tundra, and thank you for everything that you are all doing.
All right. Good stuff, Alysa. Thank you for that great lesson. Taking us
Yeah.
into the polar bear world. We're going to play Kahoot in just a moment. But before we do, I know your friend is there over your shoulder. Are you okay if I share my screen? I have the Explore Cam loaded up. Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Give me 1 second here. Let's get a closer look at our
Oh,
friend out on the ice. So hopefully that's up on the screen now.
oh,
Yeah, there we
that's
go.
Sam. Thanks, Joe.
Just spread right out, flopped right out on the ice there. Having a good old snooze.
So I should say, so these bears, so they've been on land for a few months, and again, they want to be eating seal blubber. So this guy hasn't had a great meal for several months at least. So they're doing a lot of this. They're conserving energy. They're napping a lot. We do see them playing and interacting, but there's a lot of sleepy bears out here, and they are pretty funny sometimes. So he's waiting for that ice to come back.
Yeah, he was looking around a moment ago, but he's definitely gone to a flat out position now.
Too funny. Yeah, we have a very good time watching them, whether they're walking around or sleeping like this. So they, yeah, always make us smile.
All right, I'm going to keep an eye on the cam in case we get some action, but I'm also going to load up our Kahoot now because we want to play some Kahoot. So here we go. It is coming your way now. It is Kahoot.it. You need to go to the website, Kahoot.it. And then it is going to ask you for a pin. You want 682-1472. While the Kahoot is loading, I see we have a class at John Tuck, some grade 6s who have questions ready. So let's take a couple questions while it's loading. Hey, grade 6s.
Hello.
Hi.
All right, we're ready for you, bud.
Ask me a question.
What's the biggest polar bear you ever found?
The biggest polar bear that was ever recorded was a big male polar bear in Alaska, and he weighed in at almost 2,200 pounds. But that is a big polar bear. Usually they're closer to like 1,300 pounds or so, but still very, very big.
All right, you got another one there, grade 6s?
More questions in the room, guys? Grayson, quick. We got one coming, Joe.
All right, we're ready. We have loads of classrooms coming in for our Kahoot as well, which is great. We should probably have time to visit another classroom too before we get into the Kahoot.
Fine, please. Go.
Do seals also are seals also affected by global warming in like big way?
Yeah, wonderful question. Yeah, they are. So the seals that polar bears eat, they're called ice seals, and they need the ice to have their babies on and to rest on. So if we start losing ice, then we are going to start impacting the seals as well. So right now we still have a lot of seals in the Arctic, luckily, but as that ice starts changing, the seals will be impacted. So it's something we're keeping an eye out for. Yeah, very thoughtful question. Thank you.
All right, we have some third graders in Illinois hanging out with us. How are we doing, third graders?
Hi. Okay, go ahead. You're number one, and then Dakota, you're number two.
How long do polar bears usually live? What is the longest lifespan of a polar bear?
Right. So male polar bears live usually into maybe their early 20s or late teens, and female polar bears live maybe into their mid 20s or late 20s or even early 30s. Male polar bears, they fight each other a lot in the spring, so they can really hurt each other. They don't live quite so long. But the oldest polar bear that we know of was a bear in a zoo in captivity. So she was very well pampered and taken care of. Her name was Debbie, and she lived at the Assiniboine Park Zoo in Winnipeg, and she lived until she was 42 years old. And right now that's the record for a polar bear.
Wow.
Hey, Dakota.
All right, one more from our third graders, and we're playing some Kahoot.
So has there been any of a polar bear that you rescued gone on the ice and kind of floated away on that cracked ice?
Right. So sometimes we see that in movies, right, where a polar bear floats away on the ice. And in real life, a polar bear would be pretty fine doing that. They often kind of float away on pieces of ice and then they can do swims if they have to. So one polar bear swam for 9 days straight. She swam over 600 kilometers back to shore. So it takes a lot of energy. She lost a lot of weight and she was very, very tired. But if a polar bear floats away, it can swim back. So mostly we worry about polar bears when they're stuck on land. If they have ice, they can usually figure something out. But yeah, we don't want them to swim too long or have to spend too long on land. We want them to be on that ice.
Okay. Time for some Kahoot, and then we'll get back into that Q&A action. We'll check on our friend as well after the Kahoot and see if there's been any movement. Okay, here we go. Yeah, true and false multiple choice. The quicker you get the right answer in, the more points you're going to get. So true and false, polar bears are the only marine bears. Got a nice warm up for you. Polar bears are the only marine bears. True or false? A couple more seconds to lock in your answer. I think I did. Yeah, 5 questions today. A little true and false, little multiple choice. Let's see how our polar bear experts are doing. All right, good job, crew. That's absolutely true. 8 species of bears. Polar bears definitely spend most of their time in that marine environment. The Amazon penguin. You don't hear a lot of penguins in the Amazon,
Ooh.
but here we have one today. True or false? Polar bears can only swim short distances. So I think our last question, if we were paying attention, we got a pretty good answer to this one, but we'll see how we do. So polar bears, true or false, can only swim for short distances. Well, that was quick. They got their answers in fast. That is false. Hundreds of kilometers, swimming for days. Polar bears are pretty good swimmers. Smiling buffalo in that top spot. We have a multiple choice coming your way. What are the pregnant females doing right now? Are they hunting on the sea ice? Are they getting ready to den? Are they looking for a mate? Or are they swimming to new location? So what do you think the best answer is there for what the pregnant females are doing right now? Hunting on the ice, getting ready to den, looking for a mate, or swimming to new locations? 10 more seconds to get your answer locked in. All right, getting ready to den. Good job, crew. And that's, wow, what a crazy amount of time to go without food. That's pretty impressive. Smiling buffalo, holding on. Here we go. Where won't you find polar bears? I think this will be a nice, easy one. Canada, Russia, Norway, or Antarctica. Where are we not going to find those awesome polar bears? Canada, Russia, Norway, or Antarctica? Couple more seconds. A picture decoded there for you. All right. We definitely find them in Arctic regions like Canada, Norway, and Russia. Definitely not in the south in Antarctica. We are not going to see those polar bears and those penguins hanging out anytime soon. Nimble Squid takes the lead, and here comes our final question. And if you look, we got the silly bear sneaking in second place. We'll see if they can take this competition. Sea ice is to ocean as soil is to land. Is that true or is that false? Sea ice is to ocean as soil is to land. All right, 7 more seconds, and we're going to take a look at our podium. All right, absolutely true. Yeah, you don't think about things grow, well, maybe on the sea floor, you don't often think about it on the ice, but that base of the Arctic ecosystem, that plant life, that algae growing on the bottom of the ice. Okay. In third place, what do we got? We have the legend snail. In second place, we've got the silly bear. And in first place, hold down that top spot, the nimble squid held on, but you'll notice all the avatars are bears, so that's kind of there we go.
Fun.
All right. Thanks for playing, boys and girls. Let's come back from that screen share. Let's turn off that music. We're going to go into full-on Q&A mode. I'm going to take one more look at our friend who just slightly adjusted, but is still having a nice snooze in that spot. So let's do some Q&A, and we'll see what happens. So we have Miss Vannick's crew. They are hanging out with us. Where is Miss Vannick's crew today? They are in British Columbia. Let's get them in here front and center. Hey, BC, how we doing?
Good.
Good.
All right, we're ready for you.
All right.
How fast can a polar bear run and how fast can they swim?
They can run 40 kilometers an hour, which is faster than the fastest human. And that's such a good question. I don't have an exact number for how fast can they swim. They can swim at a pretty good speed, not super speedy swimmers, but very steadily swimming for days if they have to. That's more about longevity, that one. Yeah. Great question.
All right, we got another one there.
Curtis, go. Come on up, my friend.
We have lots of time. We'll get lots of questions in.
How much food do polar bears eat in one day?
That is a great question. So polar bears are the kings of feasting and fasting. So I told you they can go a long time without eating, but when they do get to eat, they can eat a ton at one sitting. So one polar bear can eat over 100 pounds of blubber at one sitting. And that sometimes happens in the spring where there's lots of seals to eat. The spring is the best hunting time. We call that hyperphagia, which means eating a lot. So that's when they gain most of their weight. And polar bears will gain hundreds of pounds of body weight in a pretty short period of time. And they do that pretty regularly. So can you imagine eating over 100 pounds of fat in one sitting? Oh, but they can do it.
All right, pretty awesome.
Thank you.
All right, let's squeeze one more while we're here, and then we're going to go to our first graders in Chicago next.
All right, ma'am.
Do polar bears purposely hurt humans?
That's a really good question. Not usually. Usually polar bears don't want anything to do with humans. They're not out there hunting humans or anything like that. Humans have been hurt and killed by polar bears before, and there's been different circumstances for that. It's usually a hungry polar bear or a young polar bear, and
Sorry.
Sounds like a bell in the background.
but usually not. However, when we go out and we're working around polar bears, we are always trying to be very prepared. So we go in groups, we carry things like bear spray and flares and cracker shells, and then we do have a backup option just in case. But usually, almost always, we're able to scare a polar bear away.
All right. Thanks to our class in BC. Like I said, we're heading to our class. Our first graders in Chicago, they are joining us via audio today. Hey, first graders.
Hi. All right, our first question.
Why do polar bears only live in the Arctic and not the North Pole?
Oh, great question. So at the North Pole, there's no seals there. The ice is so thick, and the water's deep and dark, and so seals can't really have a good time there. So they don't live there, so the polar bears don't live there. Polar bears go where the seals are, where the food is.
Next question.
How do polar bears stand and without sleeping on the ice?
You want me to rephrase that for you?
I think I got it. How do they not slip on the ice?
How do they not slip? Oh, I love that question. Polar bears have really special feet. They have these like built-in snowshoe feet that are really big and kind of furry, and they have sticky pod pads. They have little bumps on their paws called papillae, and it gives them grip on the sea ice. And winter tire companies have used the polar bear paws as a way to make better winter tires for people. That's how special those paws are. So it gives them a lot of grip.
All right, let's grab one more from our first graders, then we'll pop over to another crew. I think we'll go to our Fab 4-5s in Toronto next.
Okay, one more.
So how fast can polar bears swim?
How fast can polar bears swim? Yeah, so they don't swim super fast, but they can swim for a long time, days if they have to. And something pretty cool is that they're really good at diving. So they can dive underwater when they need to, and we know that they can hold their breath for 3 minutes and 10 seconds at least. That's the longest we ever have. So if you try to see how long you can hold your breath, I bet it's not quite 3 minutes. Polar bears can go for long dives when they need to.
Yeah, our friend Jill Heinerth, I think you've probably worked with Jill before, maybe Alysa, maybe not, but
I know the name, yeah.
Yeah, so she did some great filming of polar bears swimming, and when the polar bears were definitely curious, so they'd have to dive down, and they got some interesting shots of the polar bears trying to follow them down. So
wow,
yeah, very, very cool. Okay, before we check in with our Fab 4-5s, I'm going to share my screen one more time, mostly so I can just keep it in the background. And as you can see, our friend looks a lot like my dog Maya does when it's nice and sunny outside. That's kind of what she does. Just
yeah, we call that a pancake bear. He's just having a nice nap. Yeah. Not worried about very much. When you're at the top of the food chain, you can just afford to nap like that in the middle of the lake, I guess.
Yeah, so I've got you full screen. That's our friend there right over your shoulder.
Right there. That's him right there.
Yeah. Yep. And even though it doesn't look like it, I promise our classrooms, this is a live video. If you look carefully, you can see the bear breathing every once in a while.
It's breathing.
It is 100% live. So hopefully we get a little bit more action before we sign off for today, but we still have Q&A time, so we'll see what happens. Okay, to our 4-5s.
How do you get genetic information from polar bears?
Ooh, I love that question. There's a few different ways. So we can get genetic information often out of their fur. So sometimes researchers go out and they're handling polar bears while the polar bear is sleeping safely, and they'll take a bit of fur. Or we can set up fur traps in areas. So like posts or barbed wire, the polar bears will come rub against it and it'll take some fur out, and we can grab that. Or we have something called a biopsy dart. So we fly a helicopter over a polar bear. We can shoot it with a little dart that takes just a little punch of skin and hair out. The bear can run away. We can retrieve that dart and get a sample out of that. And then when we take any of that hair or any of that tissue into a laboratory, and we can do some science that's very fun and do the sequencing, and we can learn all about that polar bear from its genetics. And it can teach us a lot about, what the bears need, how old they can live, how they're moving around. It's very cool research.
Okay.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Declan's making his way up.
Perfect. We're ready.
He's coming. He's coming. All right, here he is.
Hi. So my question is it true that some places in the world leave their cars or doors unlocked in places that's very populated by polar bears just for safety?
Great question. You've done some research. That is mostly true. So in Churchill, Manitoba, where I'm here right now, most people do leave their vehicles and doors unlocked. Some places have to lock up for reasons. But yeah, it's not a rule. I've heard that before, that it's a rule. It's not technically a rule, but most people do leave something unlocked. So you could jump in anywhere if there was a bear outside. Yeah, you do find that here. Mm-hmm.
All right. Thanks, 4-5s.
Yeah, thank you.
You have a chance to swing back for one more, but I want to grab a couple from YouTube. So this question is about the buggy. Do you guys ever live or sleep in the buggy?
We do all the time. So there are bunk beds in the buggy. Maybe I can show, if you look down here. So down there, see the door at the end. So there are bunk beds down there. Here, I'll come right down. Sure, I'll just be kind of mobile here. So cool. You can't really see it, but bunk beds here. We sleep here. I sleep here often. We've got a stove that we can cook lunch on. We've got a bathroom. We can really be out here for quite a while if we need to. We have a lodge out here, which is like a bunch of buggies stuck together. So at night we would hook up to the lodge and join their power, and we can kind of go in and out, but we never touch the ground when we're out here. We're always up high in a safe place away from polar bears. No one's feet are getting on the ground. But it's very fun to be out here for days at a time. We see a lot of neat stuff.
All right. This question's from a class in Hamilton. They're wondering, is it true that polar bears have black skin?
It is true. They do have black skin. We don't know exactly why. It seems like the brown bear ancestor does as well. We thought maybe it helps them absorb warmth a little bit better, but we're also kind of realizing maybe that's not true. They kind of just happen to have black skin, which is a pretty neat fact.
All right. Okay. let us visit. I think we can probably squeeze in a quick visit to each classroom before we wrap up for one kind of lightning round. So
Great.
I'm going to do it in a random order this time. So here we go. We're going to start off with our third graders in Illinois. If you have one more polar bear question, we will take it.
Has a polar bear ever drowned?
Oh, good question. Not that we've ever documented, but it's likely that it has happened since they do live their lives out on the ice. If a bear got sick or something, it could happen. Yeah, it's a really good question.
All right, we're heading to our first graders in Chicago. Our lightning round continues.
We are good on questions.
All right, fair enough. Well, can I hear you guys? One more kind of maybe a thank you to Alysa before we go. There we are. All right. Thanks, first graders. Grade sixes. Let's go to our grade sixes.
Are there many different types of polar bears?
There's only one type of polar bear, which is pretty neat. Some of the bears have like subspecies, but we just have one polar bear. But we're learning as we look at those genetics, we're learning that they're slightly different in different parts of the Arctic. So the ones where I am here, they're very adaptable, and they've got a few differences in the ones in the higher Arctic because they're so separated. So one kind, but with some subtle differences.
All right. Grade sixes. British Columbia, BC.
All right, come on up, Chloe. There we go. Go ahead. Come on over.
How strong are polar bears' bites?
Ooh, polar bears' bites are very, very strong. I don't have an exact number, but they'd be way stronger than humans could bite for sure. A bear can bite very hard. But one interesting thing is that polar bears don't bite quite as hard as grizzly bears, because grizzly bears have a crunchy diet and they eat lots of like roots and fruits and veggies, and they're chewing a lot. Whereas the polar bear diet is mostly squishy seals, so they don't have to chew so hard. So even though they can bite so hard, not quite as hard as brown bears.
All right. Thanks, Maple Ridge.
Thank you.
4-5s in Toronto.
How
She wants to know a little bit about the buggy and its tires.
how does it stick to the ice when it's so slippery?
How does it travel?
Yeah, so first we move really, really slow, and the tires are so big. So I believe they're even taller than me. So I'm like 5'3" or 5'4", and the tires are like massive and very wide, and they've got a lot of grip on them. And we will roll really slowly over the ice, so we're quite stable, and we're not going faster. We're not doing donuts or anything out here. So we're taking our time, and we have to stick to certain trails. We're not allowed to go anywhere we want. So we're all staying on the same trails, which helps too.
All right. Thanks, 4-5s. I'm going to squeeze in one more from our third graders. They asked in the chat if they could squeeze one more in. So I'm going to bring them in for one more. We'll keep our bear up there as well.
What's the biggest seal?
Ooh, the biggest seal. So the biggest seal we find in the Arctic is a bearded seal, and male bearded seal can be hundreds of pounds. So pretty big. And a polar bear is very happy when it gets a bearded seal.
Good meal for polar bear.
Right. Thanks, third graders. So, Alysa, I think a good spot to finish off. We have one more question in the chat, and they're curious about maybe 3 things, what you think maybe the top things that students could do to help with climate change. So what would you say is maybe 3 easy things students could do maybe as early as tonight or over the weekend to try and, start to help?
Right. One thing would just be keep learning, keep asking questions, whether it's about polar bears or the world around you. The more we learn, the better we can do for the planet and for ourselves. Again, also use your voice. Talk to your friends, talk to your family about what you care about, what you love. Also ask questions. Those things go together. And then the third would just be consider taking maybe a leadership role in your class if you can. Maybe talking to your teacher or your principal and asking about your school or your school district and what options are out there. Or you can do the same at home. Can you compost at home? Or kind of what programs do your city have? A lot of things that we ask people to do are just asking questions, learning more, and kind of pushing for this broader change. And adults are very influenced by the kids in their lives, and kids have so much power that they can spread and share and use. So we are very inspired all the time by the young people we talk to and their just curiosity and intelligence and passion. And it kind of keeps us going out here and makes it, oh, the bear moved its head.
Oh,
Finally.
we got a little movement. Yep, little readjustment.
Yeah, but thank you so much. Even today, all your questions are so wonderful, and it's really showing me you're doing your research and you're excited about these things and you're asking questions. And we want to keep polar bears around for a really long time, but our future is shared with polar bears. So everything we do for them is good for us too. It's really, about our own future as well.
Absolutely. Well, a huge shout out to our classrooms. Thank you for being with us in camera spots. Thanks for hanging out on YouTube. Thanks for playing Kahoot and sending in all those great questions. Let's bring our classes in. We still have them hiding out here, some of them backstage. Alysa, thank you. Thank you to your team, and happy watching there from the Tundra Buggy.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us today. We'll keep rolling out here and find some more bears.
All right, we're going to sign off for today. Have a great weekend, everyone.